first we want to simply talk about sex education. How much should you tell your kids? At what age should you start telling them? Well, also joining us this evening is Gareth Cheesman, a sex and relationships educator in Chester. Morning, Gareth.
Morning.
Well, this is a question, you know, Rachel and I were discussing earlier. How young is too young, first of all?
I don't think it can be too young in the sense of responding to the questions that the children are asking. So when children are asking questions at home at 3, 5, 7, you know, respond to their questions and be honest with it. I don't think you can be too young. It's about responding to the questions where they are.
I suppose sometimes the difficulty is you start to introduce vocabulary that you don't expect to come out of the mouth of a 5-year-old. That's what's difficult.
Yeah, but the problem without using the correct vocabulary is you end up with confusing situations. What happens when a child goes into school and starts talking about, this happened with my wee-wee? And are they talking about their genitals, or are they talking about going to the toilet? If you don't use correct vocabulary, it just can create some, very confusing situations.
Do you think the responsibility, first and foremost, comes from a parent or from the school? Where should a child ideally learn about sex?
I would hope that it would start at home, that education would start at home, that parents would be active in raising issues appropriately at the right times. But realistically, I feel that schools have a really significant role to play because many families don't have that happening.
I mean, I don't know about you, Rachel. When I was at school, there was no mention of any sex education until I think first year of GCSE, and it was done in a very biological way. There was no emotion relationship in there. It was, you know, my cousin with a blackboard when I was 8 who actually drew me diagrams. She was very good.
That's helpful.
She was very helpful.
Gareth, I really agree with you that I wish that sex education started at home. But I do feel that parents feel uneducated about how to go about it. And so it does end up falling down to the school, in which I'm an extraordinarily strong supporter of sex education in schools. I want much more of it, much more often, have it much more available in the way that the Americans do, and they have on-site school counsellors where all sorts of questions can be asked at any time. And I really think that that's our responsibility as a society to put that in our schools. But aside from that, what you're doing, Gareth, is a great start for that. But would you like to see parents being invited in? I mean, maybe you're going to tell me that you already do this. Do you hold workshops for parents who want to learn how to talk to their children about sex?
I would love to be more involved in talking with parents. Unfortunately, with limited funds, we're not able to branch off into every area we'd like to go. But I think it could be a real key area because I think there are many parents who are they feel out of their depth. They don't know how to even approach some of these topics, particularly when you start throwing in all the complications of modern technology. I think that means that they feel out of depth and they feel that anything they say will be too late or not detailed enough, and they don't feel empowered.
And then throwing into the mix on top of that the kind of current very newsworthy topic about abuse and all the terrible kind of things that are coming out on the press, and parents are already paranoid about paedophilia and are our children safe.
This is what I meant about the vocabulary.
Exactly. You don't want your kids coming. Everyone's scared to death of that. What if my child uses the word vagina to describe her vagina? What's wrong with that? And even now I'm bristling because I'm on the BBC and I've just said vagina 3 times now. Sorry, Tim. Mrs. Fussy having a little panic attack over there. But, but that's an anatomical language. It's something that we shouldn't be afraid of. Children shouldn't be afraid to use. I think this is about empowering parents.
I mean, I was asked, Gareth Cheesman, by my 5-year-old the other day, how I know I came out of your tummy, how did I get in there? And I said, Daddy put a seed in there, which instantly I just thought, what on earth am I saying? She then looked me in the eye and said, but how did he put it in there? How did it get in there? And I'm ashamed to say, I went, look, there's Dora the Explorer. and completely changed the subject because I didn't know what to say. And I'm a parent. It was nonsense.
First of all, I would never be ashamed the fact that we're all human and we're all going to say the wrong thing at a time and something's not going to come out quite right. I think it is hard in those situations because I think children have a wonderful knack of asking these questions at the point where you're really not expecting it. And it just completely throws you. And I think it's perfectly natural for that to happen. So it's good to try and give them an answer and to try and tell them, well, actually, that's one of the differences between males and females. Look, Daddy has a penis and part of the penis's job is to deliver the seed. And I think that is good to give them that vocabulary because although it might make a few maybe teachers raise an eyebrow, in the end, it's going to stop there being confusion. It means that they will understand the correct vocabulary to use for the next 5, 10 for the rest of their life. You know, it's going to be a useful skill to have. And it's sadly one of the things that the latest government recommendations have cut out.
But Rachel,
about naming the body parts, and then they've said, but don't name penises or vaginas.
I mean, Rachel, you're right. I mean, and what you said, Gareth, absolutely. You know, you're terrified of being the parent who gets the tap on the shoulder from the teacher who says, this is what your daughter's been telling the entire class today. And you think, oh, and you do clench.
Yeah, and I can see why. It does feel like we're living in a very scary time. But actually, it's the opposite. What makes it scary is the cloak and dagger stuff, the smoke and the mirrors, the wrong words. These are actually tools. If there were, you know, for every evil predator out there, they're looking for those kind of gaps in a child's knowledge to abuse. Give your children what you said right at the beginning, Sam, you know, self-awareness and the respect to understand that your body is yours, that it's private, that nobody has the right, but you need to understand it too. And I think that explaining exactly what the child asks, but not giving any more information than they've asked. I think parents go into this thing, oh no, I've got to do the birds and the bees.
Tell everything.
Yeah, and then you give them so much information that normally they're the one that goes, yeah, all right, Mum and Dad, I think Dora the Explorer's just gone, so if you don't mind, shut up now.
Karen, you're in Devon, morning.
Yes, good morning.
So can you tell me about the conversation in your house?
Well, the conversation, I think what I said to your researcher was that the conversation in my house when I was a child was never a conversation because my parents adopted me when they were quite elderly, in their 60s, in fact. And so my father was dead by the time I was 8 years old. And my mother provided for me, but she couldn't talk to me about it until I found this. And I said, what is it? And she said, oh, it's your, you know, when you have your... You've got to get to a point where you have your, you know, and it was all about, you know, your period. And I didn't know anything about it. I didn't realise that once you get your period, you can be, you know, you can get pregnant and all this sort of stuff. And I don't know how. I didn't know how you can get pregnant. I thought I was, you know, I got a very nice, very, very nice kiss when I was 15 years old, and I thought, well, that's it, I'm pregnant now.
Oh,
you know?
no.
And the next day, my best friend knew about it. She was only 15 as well, and said, are you pregnant now? And of course, yes, yeah, I'm thinking, I must be pregnant now. And for about 6 months, I thought I was pregnant.
Oh.
So when I myself had children, I thought there's absolutely no way I'm going to do anything like that to them. They will need to know.
Well, Karen, I want to hear how you pass that knowledge on to your children. But first, we need to cross to Kevin Howells. Just one moment, we need to cross to Kevin Howells. There's been action, Kevin, in the cricket.
There has, yes. Won't keep you long. Just to say that Johnny Bairstow is out. He got squared up, really, off the third over after lunch. Southey, the bowler, he's been caught in the slips as Bairstow, out for only 6. Real problems here for England, as, to be honest, we always thought there was going to be. Ian Bell is still there on 42, but England now at 159 for 6.
Thank you very much, Kevin Howells, there with the latest update on the cricket.
All day. I've been listening all day. Listen, I'm just telling you quickly, okay?
Yes,
because I don't want to be a nuisance.
You're not a nuisance, Karen in Devon, not at all.
When I had my children myself, right, after they were 3 and 5 years old, my husband and I split up. And it was just myself and my kids. And they eventually sort of started asking questions. When they were getting a little bit older, and I'm not saying they're very old, I'm talking about them being sort of 5 and 6 years old, and I would go and say, well, let's go and sit down, and we'll talk about it, and we would draw pictures, And I would draw pictures of fallopian tubes and wombs and little tiny eggs and stuff. And then they would sort of look at it and say, oh, well, yeah, I understand that. That's okay,
Yeah.
And then they'd go away and not ask me anything else, which is why I agree with the lady that you've got on before me, or the official lady that you've got on, that if you tell children little bits that they can understand, and then they go away and they're quite happy, and that's what my children did.
Karen, you were brilliant, as you said, with just only answering questions you were asked. You stayed on the biology of it, on the function of it.
Yeah,
what about the emotional and moral side of things? Did you ever discuss that side of relationships and sex with them?
I mean, that's another big question, because the moral side of things is that I was brought up as a Catholic, and I didn't want that sort of side to be laid on my kids either, because it's too big. I think, if you're a Catholic, don't have children. Don't have no. The only thing I did think about the children was that I didn't want them to have this huge weight on them.
Okay, Karen.
I think that's inspired,
Yeah.
and I think anybody who's kind of grown up in a sort of strange sexual arena, in a sense of maybe nobody talked about it ever in any way, shape, or form, and perhaps there was not even affection in your house. It's really very, very difficult to learn how to talk about sex if you've never had it taught to you. And I know that, we always laugh with Tony about it, because he's got 2 teenage daughters, and he's just absolutely, they start talking about sex and he starts putting his fingers in his ears and starts singing as loud as he can. And they just go, shut up, Dad. That's the end of it.
But you've made a really good point there, because, I find it easier, even though I do use the Dora the Explorer, side angle. I still find the concept of talking about sex, I've got 2 daughters, much easier than my husband, who is Tony Livesey school, who just went, that does not compute. Yeah. That's never going to happen.
That's
They're not
your
leaving the house
area,
till
Sam.
there. Well, or more, they're girls. Is there a difference as well, Gareth Cheesman, you found about the way that sex education is approached with boys and girls?
I think there's times when there does need to be a different approach. I think there are times when it's useful to have that gender divide, and particularly when talking through puberty and body changes. But also that I find that sometimes can actually be negative in a lesson, because some of the best learning is not from what I'm telling them, it's from what they're hearing from each other, and realising that those boys on the other side of the class, actually, they're struggling with exactly the same issue that I'm struggling with. So it's getting that balance of, at certain times, allowing those discussions to happen when, boy-only groups and girl-only groups, but at other times bringing them together intentionally to show that they're not aliens to each other. Look, these are the same issues that they're dealing with.
Yeah, I think I couldn't agree more. I think that we need both. We need separate classes so that we can discuss things that you wouldn't possibly want to discuss in front of boys, or boys would feel mortified for their girlfriends to know about. But yeah, a group situation, because where else are you going to hear it?
And I find that sometimes they're missing really basic information. So whenever we do lessons on puberty in the work I do, we make sure that the boys and the girls, they get a summary at least of what the others are hearing as well. Otherwise, the girl's vagina just becomes this mystery for the boys for the rest of their life. If they don't hear some of this basic stuff, they won't understand.
You want to get your hands on some of Karen from Devon's diagrams. They sounded absolutely fantastic, didn't they?
They do. Diagrams are brilliant. I recommend everyone use diagrams. It's the one thing I always teach to youth workers when I'm training them. I'm like, make sure you can draw a good diagram, because if you can draw a good diagram, you can explain so much and they'll remember it.
Rachel, we heard from Karen from Devon, her experiences of being kept completely in the dark about sex, about puberty, about relationships, full stop, and how that completely changed how she discussed things with her children. As a mother of a now grown-up boy, how did you find out, and how did you tell your son?
How did I find out myself?
Yeah, about sex.
Well, I grew up with a kind of threat of sort of Damocles hanging over my head. If you get knocked up, then I'm going to kill you, because that's how I ruined my life, which is very tragic. That my mother really did believe that she got pregnant at 19 and then got pregnant 6 more times. It was, there's a good old Irish Catholic family for you. And so I grew up with this kind of, you must not do the same thing. And so we were very well armed with sexual information from very young ages, and that's 5 girls. And so, so we all really knew our way around a good sexual reproductive diagram from the age of before we knew how to do Humpty Dumpty, I think, pretty much. So for me, it really wasn't that much of a leap. What was tricky was that it was a boy.
Yeah,
I know all the girl stuff.
Yeah.
But I was a single parent with Josh by the time he was 3. So by the time he was asking those questions of me, I was, I had to go and look up stuff online. My little tiny baby boy, sorry, Josh, if you're listening, was having erections.
He's so not listening to this.
He's not noisy. It's gone ages ago. Oh, bless him. He had to go to school while I was writing the sex problem page for Cosmo. That wasn't good for him. Yeah. That really wasn't good for him. But I remember him, getting erections at the age of sort of 2, or even, around that age, and being absolutely like, what is going on? I didn't know that happened. And when I spoke to my very good friend, who is a fella, he said, him and his brothers, that was very normal. And that, so I had to go out and find out stuff. And I didn't know that I didn't know until I needed to know. So our best tool is the internet these days. It serves us well. Go and find out.
Carissa, what are people saying?
So Al's texted in saying, growing up in the north of Scotland, sex was a taboo subject at home. I lost my virginity at 14 to a woman of 23. And we've had a tweet as well from Sam that says, my 6-year-old daughter asked me, Daddy, why are you my dad? How best do I answer her?
Gareth.
Wow.
Yeah, Gareth.
Yeah, Gareth.
Please, Gareth.
It's really hard, and I think those kind of vague questions are the questions which stir up that thing of, what are they actually asking?
Yeah.
Are they asking almost about the family tree? Are they asking, why are you my dad? Why are you with mummy? Why are you together? Or are they asking the biological, how are you my father? How are you my daddy? And it's almost, you want to ask, well, you want to try and pull out a bit more information to try and find, is this a biology question, or are they just curious about how you got together as a couple? And that can cause one of those great kind of like, oh, what do I say? So I would recommend asking, well, what do you mean by that? What do you want to know about this? And then if they are asking the biology, say literally, I'm your daddy because you are half the same as me. You're half my DNA and you're half mummy's DNA.
Do you know what? Do you know what it's reminding me actually is of how many families now? I mean, 1/4 of families are single parents. So there's an awful lot of daddies out there who aren't biologically related to their children. And I wonder if this isn't a good opportunity to say, well, there's a difference between daddy and father sometimes. I'm your father because the seed that created you came from me with mummy's egg. But what makes me your daddy is because I put you to bed at night, because I read you a story, because you feel safe with me.
Sam, we hope that has cleared up your question. Please do report back and let us know. Thank you very much. Gareth Cheesman, good to speak to you. Thank you. And of course, we'll talk more with Rachel in just a few moments here on 5 Live.